Is desire the root of all suffering? I think this is a sort of concept where it seems very simple from the outside, but actually very nuanced when once we start to dissect it in full. I gave an example the other day about someone who's lived a lot of sort of highs and lows in life. They've made the most of their life experience and they're maybe even nearing the end of it. And they tell people to, meditate in the woods and do whatever else, detach, and that desire is the root of all suffering. But that advice is sort of easy when it comes from someone who's already had and experienced those things. So I think desire can be a source of suffering, but I wouldn't say desire is the root of all suffering because you may have a desire to travel the world. And is it so wrong to travel the world? Is it wrong to have that desire to travel the world? Is it wrong to have a desire to have a family? I don't think these things are inherently and objectively wrong. I think more than anything, what we suffer from is expectations and attachment. When we desire things in a very sort of specific manner, when we put requirements on our happiness that are sort of ultra specific and almost hard to fulfill, then I think desire starts to encapsulate itself as a form of suffering. But when we acknowledge our human desire, and we can also acknowledge that another aspect of ourselves is almost infinite and is pure awareness, then we can see, okay, I can actually play both sides. I can actually give energy and sort of give life to my desires because there is something within me that is calling me to experience these things. How do we know that desire is not going to be a greater teacher and greater lesson than the detachment and the letting go of it all? I think it would be very sort of close-minded to think that we would learn more from this life experience if we were to just let go of everything and sort of vanquish and eliminate all our desires. Sure, that might lead you to less suffering, but if suffering is what teaches us, if suffering is what expands our consciousness, and if suffering is what evolves our, as some might say, souls, then why wouldn't we take that path instead of the one that doesn't include those things? I think to say that desire is the root of all suffering is almost sort of a blanket statement. There's so much more to it. And most of all, I would say attachment is what causes suffering. And even then, I'll play devil's advocate and I'll say I don't even think that attachment is completely bad and worth sort of abandoning. I think attachment teaches us lessons. I think in all the things that these sort of older teachings represent, there will be a lot of teachings that say, for example, get rid of your desires, cut off your attachments, and you will have less suffering. And that is objectively true. That is objectively true. If you cut those things off, if you train your mind to not want any of those things, you will have less suffering. But I think the missing link here is that there will be a decent amount of misery. And I don't think that objectively, and I don't think that the universe has a sort of built-in principle where the objective is to let go of all desires and cut off all attachments. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's to learn from the desires, to learn from the attachments, and only in that process can we actually detach and get sort of a proper distance from those desires. It's easy for someone who doesn't have a lot to say, I'm giving up all my material possession, I'm giving up on all of it. Well, of course, but what if it was offered to you in a much larger quantity? What if someone came up to you and say, I will grant you one wish? Would you not wish for that thing? And if that's the case, now this entire practice is flawed because you're practicing detachment and you're practicing letting go of your desires out of a place of really giving up on things that you actually want deep in your heart. So I'm not a big subscriber into any sort of practice and any sort of philosophy where things are ultra one dimensional because I think reality is not one dimensional. I think reality itself is nuanced and I think it's actually fluid. And more than anything else, where we choose to place our beliefs and where we choose to create set in stone facts mentally is what is actually going to prosper in our lives. I don't think that there is built-in conditions into reality saying that we have to let go and ease our desires. Because like I said before, yes, if you eliminate desires, you train your mind, which you can train your mind to basically believe and act in a multitude of ways. So if you train your mind to not be attached to desire, then yes, you will have less suffering. But will you be satisfied with that? Will you not be bored? Some will not be bored, but many others will be. And that's why I think the main sort of practice of letting it all go and almost residing in awareness and retiring in awareness isn't the answer at mass scale. It's the answer for some people. It is. It is the answer for some people. Whether that be that's the answer from when they're very young, or maybe that's the answer they come to after living a very heightened experience life. That can be the answer that they arrive to. But I'm a firm believer that there is not one answer that suits all. There is not one destination that is uniform, though I think the teachings can camouflage themselves to bring us to learning the same sort of set of values that another teaching would have. So is desire the root of all suffering? I think not. And I think in your effort to get rid of desire, I would like to ask you why. And the greatest thing we can do in relation to this topic is we can be brutally honest with ourselves. Be brutally honest. There's no sort of moral judge watching over you. You're probably listening to this on a walk or on your way somewhere, whatever the case may be, or you're most likely listening to this alone. Ask yourself, if I can have anything from my life, if I can have anything, if I cannot feel the guilt of sort of moral obligation, or maybe even philosophic or theologic obligation, that sort of means religious obligation, but we won't tap into that. But if I can have that, what would it look like? Would it be a family? Would it be something certain material? It doesn't mean that we need to surrender ourselves to this thing, to these things and give it all of our power. But most of all, what it means is we have to acknowledge that. And you have to sort of bring away the psychological guilt and obligation. Because there's no force that is pushing you into nothingness. There's no force saying you can't be anyone. You can't have these things. And I think, if anything, one of the true life lessons may very well be that we have to overcome that inner self, that inner child that believes we can't have the things that we desire. Because if we give all our power to those desires, if we are like a dog who picks up on a scent and can't do anything but run towards that scent, then yes, it will cause suffering. But if we also let go of all those desires in an effort to give up on the wanting of it, we will be met with misery. And not only that, we will be met with a great tension of inauthenticity inside of us. The root of suffering can be many things. It can be many things. And as Eckhart Tolle often says, it's almost always an avoidance of living in the present moment, of living in the now. And I think that's what it comes back to as well. Who are we to tell a person who's living a decent life for themselves, who has decent emotional regulation, is most of the time pretty content with their life? Who are we to tell them that they are living wrong? We can't. And the notion that there is a spiritual component in we can't have anything and we have to let go of it all is, in my opinion, a little bit too one-dimensional, a little bit too one-sided. It doesn't encapsulate the entire human journey in an authentic way. The people who learn the most are the people who experience the most. If you're trying to avoid suffering, you'll be met with plenty of it. If you're trying to cut off the desires to avoid suffering, I have a strong suspicion that suffering will find you either way. Because you still want those things. You still do. And some wantings, yes, we can numb. We can sort of cancel out because we say that's not going to be good for us. Or if we want to lash out in anger, we say that's not going to be good for another person. So we value impulse control as well. But if you want to start and create and have or anything else a successful career, the spiritualist is obligated to acknowledge that there must be a balance in both material and spiritual. There must be. And from a psychological perspective, we want to bring this all back to ground. This is all rooted in certain belief systems that we've been giving power to for way too long. Way too long. And if you're feeling a sort of resistance in your life, it may be because of those misplaced beliefs, right? I talk a lot, and I'm writing about in my new book how the very nature of life and the very nature of our relationship with reality is paradoxical. We oftentimes need what we don't necessarily want, or rather, what we don't necessarily believe that we should be doing. So, in one of the chapters, I wrote that the spiritualist went to the teacher and asked the teacher, "What can I do to be more spiritual?" And the teacher said, "Get a job." I know that sounds a little ridiculous, but so 6 months, a year passed, and the spiritualist came back to the teacher. The teacher said, "How'd it go?" And the spiritualist said, "It went amazing. I met so many new friends. I've learned so much about myself. I've found a hidden passion that I never knew that I can explore and build upon." And the teacher says, "Very good." And then the flip side, a materialist. So this is someone who is very, overcome with the desire of the material world, money, cars, whatever else, physical material. They come into the room on their phone speaking to their boss or whoever, and they come to the teacher and they say, "How can I be more successful?" And the teacher says, "Go meditate in the woods and let go of it all." And this is obviously something they didn't want to hear, but 6 months to a year pass by, and that person comes back, and the teacher asks, "Well, how did it go?" And the person says, "I've found an even deeper meaning of success and an inner fulfillment. I had enough of material success, but what I was really lacking and what I was really aching for was a sort of more authentic, genuine success in relationships, personal development, and psychological growth." And that's the sort of paradigm that my beliefs fall under many of the time, is sort of the law of opposites, and that we can come back to a certain balancing point to meet reality and our highest alignment, wherever that may be.